just to let you all know, Patty has landed safely here in Oregon. She's not quite herself yet. But she's praying for us this morning, assuming she's awake. There probably aren't many of us that pray for God to protect us on a regular basis. We're probably more likely to pray such prayers as a result of certain circumstances that we face, like an illness, or the death of someone dear to us, or driving, or flying. So is our attitude in life that we really don't need God until tragedy or some fearful circumstances strike? Have we simply put our trust in the world? Well, I think it's true that we do have some kind of basic trust in the world. We engage in most of life without even having to think twice about it. Our parents probably worked hard to help us trust the world into which we've been born. In all of the driving that I do, particularly going down to the south coast to supply and churches there, I do a lot of driving on the highway. And driving along at 55 and 60 miles an hour, and then there's a car coming at me at the same speed, or higher, and all that stands between the two of us is that little yellow line. There's an amazing amount of trust that goes into that. And we don't even think about it after a while. We know that's how it works. But then our trust in the world falters when something happens and it threatens us. When its usual orderliness is replaced with disaster. And even then, we can trust the world so much that we can tend to look to the world to fix the world. And so we go see a doctor or a lawyer, or we count on politicians or soldiers to protect us, or we even look just to nature to right something that seems to have gone wrong. Now, prior to the portion of Psalm 33 that was read this morning, the psalmist points out that the loving kindness of the Lord fills the whole earth. The world's dependability comes from God. But then there are the times that our basic trust in the world fails us. And then there's this portion that the psalmist writes. There is no king that can be saved by a mighty army. A strong man is not delivered by his great strength. The horse is a vain hope for deliverance. For all its strength, it cannot save. There are times when all the resources of the world around us cannot fix what has gone wrong. And the measures that we rely upon so deeply oftentimes just fail us. Doctors can be wrong, or they can be dumbfounded. Cars and computers break down. Companies have layoffs, or they go bankrupt. As good as they may be as solutions for many concerns, our favorite protectors and sustainers can fail to deliver lasting results. And it may be at these times that we find ourselves praying for God's help. Well, the psalm encourages us to trust God over the long haul, not just for some kind of immediate solution. While much of the psalm is a voice calling to the people gathered, for the people to respond, and then at the end of the psalm, they finally get to respond. The voice of the people gathered is heard. Our soul waits for the Lord. And it concludes with, we have put our trust in you. The psalm assumes that those who use it are in difficulty at times in their lives, and the usual solutions have not worked. Even God's solutions have not yet materialized. And so they say that they wait for God. They trust God, but they need to wait. See, the psalm shares with us a perspective that does not look for quick solutions that will protect and safeguard us from moment to moment. Instead, it looks for the shielding of God that gets us through all of our lives. Gets us through even the most difficult of times. This is the faith in the God who is taking us somewhere beyond where we are right now. And we see this illustrated in the life of Abraham. God's initial call to Abraham was that he was to leave the land of his family, and God would show him a new land and make him a great nation. And as the writer of Hebrews points out, Abraham listened and he trusted God and he went, but he didn't know where he was going. And even when he got there and prospered in many ways, and he had all sorts of wealth, and he had a huge household of servants and things, his connection to the land was tentative. He continued to live in tents. He didn't own any of the land that he was on. And that's the way it's always been for his descendants. They lay claim to the land for a while and then they lose it. And as we read from Genesis, Abraham was getting a bit impatient about the promise of becoming a great nation. When he and Sarah had yet to have even one child of their own, where was this nation as vast as the stars in heaven coming from? And as it's described in the book of Hebrews, Sarah is unable to bear children, and Abraham was too old to have children, and then I love this, being good as dead. It's not a very positive view of Abraham at the time. Now, eventually, Isaac and Jacob are born. But Abraham doesn't see anything like a multitude of offspring. It's never there in his life on earth. He barely gets out a couple kids. What is amazing is that Abraham left the land of his ancestors and had faith in God's promise that his descendants would be as numerous as the stars of heaven. Why did he have that faith? We don't really know. We're just told he did. And so it's sort of amazing that he was willing to risk all that, to step out. But then we have to be fair about Abraham, because he was really a human being like just the rest of us. That when his offspring is delayed, Abraham complains. And at another time tries to take matters into his own hand and have a kid by a slave woman. But even so, even with his faltering, Abraham shows an amazing trust in God. What is this faith? Well, ultimately, it is trust in the person of God. It's not a set of beliefs or a program for success. It is a trust in the person of God, in the character of God. In a God who comes and sits with us when times are difficult. A God who comes and celebrates with us when times are good. And at both kinds of times reminds us that there is something even better awaiting us. You see, particularly what the book of Hebrews is trying to point out here, is that God is up to something that is way bigger than our own individual lives, way bigger than anything we can see right now. We only get a glimpse of what God has in store. But God wants us to trust that there is a place for each of us in what God has designed and is building. And like Abraham, we are not likely to be perfect in our trust in God. But hopefully, like Abraham, we will have our moments where we unflinchingly trust and entrust our whole lives into God's hands, knowing that there is a better world waiting for us out ahead of us. So as the song says, so we wait. We wait for God's timing. And we trust that God has a plan. Amen.
Amen.